Hello, Fausty Witches. I'm all zoomed in, like, because I'm the only one here. Chris is travelling at the moment, so he may come in later, he may not come in later, but I don't know how to make all the image go, like, small, so, you know. I'm not the most flattering zoomed in, I know, but this is real life. So, today we were going to plan on talking about magic to do with money. So we kind of used the hashtag my financial whatever has changed because generally when you finish with a subscription or you want to cancel something, it's one of the options. And what a lot of people tend to do when they're cash strapped, don't have enough money, is to try and make cuts. So it makes sense, it's logical. Why pay for something you don't need? Why pay for something you don't use? But what I want to talk about really primarily today is this whole idea of witches and magical practitioners using magic to get money, to become rich, to become more wealthy, blah de blah de blah. Is it possible? One of the most popular questions I think that mundanes have, but are often actually too scared to ask, is can you use magic to become obscenely rich and the like? And of course, in Fausty Witch style, I'll answer this question straight away before we really get any viewers tuning in. And that answer to that question is yes, of course you can fucking use magic to become obscenely rich. Are you kidding? Why would you not? Unless you don't want to. So really the question is, why aren't loads of witches obscenely rich? Well, a lot of them actually are. I know a fair amount of magical practitioners, not all of which are witches, and a lot of them are in that kind of, the very least, they're all in the top 10%. I do know a couple of 1%ers, but they are quite wealthy. They've got as much money as they want, and maybe a little more. Definitely more than they need. However, this doesn't really, when you're talking witchcraft and the kind of archetype of the witch, you kind of think is like a poor old beggar kind of person that lives in a rundown house, don't you? It's not exactly, doesn't exactly scream wealth. Now, this is what we need to get into, and then later on in the show, I think we'll concentrate a little bit more on money magic because I want to kind of take you on a journey here. So, why is it that you don't see a huge amount of witches driving around in Ferraris and the like? Well, apart from the fact that obviously no one with taste actually buys a Ferrari, let's be fair. If you had that amount of money and you had taste, you would buy a Maserati, obviously. You wouldn't buy a bloody Ferrari, would you? So, obviously, kidding aside, history of witchcraft back in the day, you're kind of thinking about that local cunning wise person. Now, the origins of the witchcraft, the origins of the word witch, are really, you're kind of talking about a mysterious figure. For some reason, my phone keeps flashing stuff up, so I don't really know what's going on. Let's pull out the plug and see if that helps. A mysterious figure, which is kind of like one of those people which you don't really know whether they're a witch or not. Which, back in the day, medieval kind of period, and perhaps maybe even before that, you're talking about some kind of mysterious person, not someone that went around calling themselves a witch. It was kind of like an accusation. So the idea really that we think in terms of old-fashioned witches is really what we're talking about is cunning folk. That person in the village, or that person on the edge of town, or that crazy old man or woman in the city that has some magical knowledge that everyone knows to go to if they want a magical fix to their problems, right? Now, a lot of these people, very often when you look back, they are everyday people. They're everyday people that are a little bit quirky and strange, that have a lot of magical knowledge. So really what you're talking about is the equivalent nowadays, I tend to see, is tradespeople. Because back in the day, the cunning arts, cunning folk, although they would often have some sort of trade or something that they do, often as a front for their real business. They really work on the same kind of level in that someone comes to them, they want a job doing, and that person will hackle with, they'll hackle with you and say, cross my palms with silver and I'll do that job type thing. Now, nowadays, a lot of people would say, that's like contacting a plumber, You've got a problem, leaky pipes, and you think, I think I'm going to need to call out the plumber. The plumber turns up. They make a special magical noise, which is like, which basically means it's going to be expensive. And then they quote you for some, I don't know, obscene amount of money. And then they fix the problem, ideally, if they're any good. And then you go away and you think, I don't have a clue why they did that, but the problems are gone now. It's really a lot like tradespeople, I think. Back in the day, you had a lot of cunning folk that were tradespeople. Currently, I have a lot of folk that were tradespeople. Back in the day, it meant that you were able to, make a living, make a decent-ish amount of money. You could certainly get by on your skills. Nowadays, the same is also true. The difference really is that this idea of professional witches, that day in the UK at least, and in certain places in the US, Western society, kind of had its day to a certain extent. A lot of those kind of professional witches went out in the 20th century for everyday tasks. Nowadays, it's all purely magical stuff. You don't tend to go to the local witch for healing and the like. So in terms of the sort of work that magical practitioners these days that are public and professionals do, then the list of, I suppose, jobs or the list of reasons why people go to them is a lot smaller, I would say. Now we live slightly more comfortable lives also, and that nowadays magic isn't really a thing. What you tend to find is a lot of modern magical practitioners, if I'm honest with you, are con artists. So you've got a lot of people that are pushing out the idea of magic and selling you a spell for £600. Very often more than that. I've seen spells going for money to help someone that's in debt or to help someone get more money. I've seen jar spells and candle spells being sold for over £1,000. Obviously, it's a poor person buying that. That's con artistry. Whether the spell works or not, really, I think at that extent, that's either con artistry or, at best, shady business practices. But anyway, much like in general style, I think I might be going off on a tangent. So basically, what do we have the problem with? The problem is, why aren't our witches all rich? Rich witch. Where's the rich witch? Okay, so I come from the perspective, in terms of a lot of our personal magical work, both me and Chris, is more of a classical perspective. It's the sort of thing that you go off, like the old witch from classic mythology, can't stand society, goes off and has their own island whereby they do a magical experiment and like. It's a personal kind of path that you go down to obtain more knowledge and power and do crazy messed up experiments, generally is what we do when we're not mentoring. The psychology of someone that's like that is not the sort of person that's wanting to rule the world. Is not the sort of person that's wanting to gain a huge amount of material wealth and possessions and stuff. What drives them, what they're interested in, is knowledge, okay, at the end of the day, and to a certain extent, power, mastering magical ability. They're not all that fussed with kind of the earthly, everyday necessities. This is why a lot of those kind of archetypes of people on that path are pretty crazy, pretty poor hygiene, don't look after themselves, live in crazy ass rundown places in the middle of nowhere because they don't really want to be bothered. Okay, we have lower mysteries, all of the things that are to do with gaining a health, wealth, that sort of thing, and then we have the higher mysteries. People on the higher mysteries, not really all that, they tend to go a bit crazy, a lot of them, but a lot of the people on that path have obtained a huge amount of power but spend more time up there than they do down here in the physical world. Does it mean that they can't use their ability to get what they want? No, they generally can get what they want. The problem is they often don't want it. They're the quite humble people very often. Whenever I've met a lot of extremely powerful and adept magical practitioners in this life, in this world, currently alive today, there are one or two that are in the kind of multi-millionaire or billionaire category that really like that kind of lifestyle. But actually, the vast majority of them, they have enough money, capital to get an easy life where they don't actually have to work. They're just kind of have enough free time to go off on magical adventures and quests and the like. So, and generally the sort of people that you get with that aren't really necessarily the showy types. A lot of magical practitioners these days, I know you may not think this if you've visited places like Glastonbury, but a lot of us tend to keep a low profile. We don't tend to run around in pointy hats and the like. Generally, the sort of people that do that are craving attention. And if they're craving attention, you kind of have to ask yourself why they're craving attention. Most magical practitioners that are on that kind of lonely road, crooked path, are the sort that kind of want to be left alone. They don't want to draw attention to themselves. They will use power and magic to break through obstacles. So if money is an obstacle, if they need to buy a plot of land in which to work, they're going to be buying that plot of land in which to work. Now, do they necessarily need that plot of land in which to work? No, they might opt for, I don't know, visiting a sacred site or going into the woods or something like that. But should they need to, or should they really want to, then they should be able to use their magical knowledge to obtain what they want. So why is it that we still have a lot of magical witches, practitioners, psychics, and the like that haven't got two pennies to rub together? Ultimately, it's really quite simple. And that's that they ain't very good at magic. That's the simple reason, is they're not particularly great at magic. Now, going along a magical path is dangerous. It can make you go fucking crazy. So, generally speaking, a lot of magical practitioners that I see that really start out on a path, they start off, some of them, not all of them, they start off relatively sane and normal, but the more they learn of the mysteries, the less involved they are with the everyday world, what you'd call the rat race, and the more power they obtain, the more of a struggle they find to fit in with the everyday world. And that can manifest in a number of ways. Often it manifests with them pushing away from the physical world and kind of not really maintaining a particularly normal life, becoming a little bit of a crazy recluse. But then also it can end up, because magic is dangerous and can be very dangerous, destabilizing them. So if they go on and bite off more than they can chew, then that can end up messing up their lives. And if it messes up your life, it may mess up your health, it may mess up your wealth, money, all of these sorts of things can be messed up. Making mistakes within magic, because magic is real, can have a serious effects on your physical life. Okay, if you go to do a job for a magical job or working or whatever it is, and you mess it up, there are consequences to things getting messed up, obviously. Alex has actually just written, what's wrong with being a recluse? There's nothing wrong with being a recluse. I do get on very well. Some people say I'm a recluse. I'm not entirely sure whether I am a recluse, because I think I'm a bit too social with that. But I do dislike people, and there's only a certain amount of people that I can cope with. And I personally have to book people in as well. Speaking of the people, one of the people I do have a lot of time for is, of course, the faustiest witch of them all, Chris, who I'm told is joining us currently. Faustiest witch of them all, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, good.
Well, weird, but we both seem to be against white backgrounds for a change. What's going on with
Yeah.
that?
Well, we're being all, nice today. The good side's coming out, because we know that a lot of people are in bad financial situations, and a lot of people that have come from poorer backgrounds or that want to use magic for the first time, often money spells is quite a popular one. So I'm thinking this is a serious show today, Chris.
Okay.
So we've got to
Okay.
put our little angel halos on.
Okay.
Now mine's ran out of battery, so I thought I'd opt
say,
for the background.
do I need to put mine up a bit?
No, that's just an eerie glow. I don't think that counts.
Oh, damn it.
So money magic and that. Have you been listening so far or not?
No, I've just come out of a 2-hour lecture about colour theory. I think it was actually
no.
2 hours long, but it felt that long.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking a little bit about why rich is as poor, and that proper witches, for want of a better word, that aren't crazy and have got magical abilities, they're not poor. They can pretty much use magic to get what they want. They might not always want money. If they want a car, they might not necessarily choose to do money magic to get that car. They might choose to do magic just to get the car straight away and win it or something. But, I'm thinking we should probably go into some practical money magic if you're in a dodgy financial situation. So one of the things that I always say to people to avoid is to copy in the spell books, because whenever you open a magical book, whether it's, it doesn't really matter what it is, it always gives you these kind of tidbits, these old wives' tales. Oh, put a bit of bay leaf in your shoes and you're walking on victory and money will come to you.
Yeah.
How does that work, though? You ask the person that and they can't tell you, I've done money magic for people, and I've always been able to tell them how it's supposed to work and why I've chosen that approach for them as well. So what are your thoughts on the copy and paste type spells for money magic?
Well, I don't like anything that's copy and paste.
So
unless it's pictures of tiger penises, but I'm only going to throw that in once because I've heard they're good for prosperity spells too.
Okay. Hashtag tiger penis spells from the hashtag Tiger King.
Yeah, hashtag Tiger King. He made lots of money. Look what it did to him.
Okay. So obviously, if you ain't got money, there's a reason why you ain't got money. So you need to break down and have a little think about the reasons why you don't have money, and then start thinking of those reasons as problems, I think, and to go after and use magic to work against those problems. So if you've got a lot of outgoings, then that might be a problem. I've met people that are on 6-figure incomes and they've got no money because they're spendaholics. And it doesn't matter if you increased their 6-figure salary to a segment.
They just spend more.
They just spend more. So the magic needs to be for money is not to bring more in, it's actually to stop them from spending on stupid shit. So, that doesn't really help the everyday person, the sort of person that might be listening to this. Now, I know that when we went on a tour, doing all the psychic fairs and that, we came up with kind of 2 go-to super simple formulas for creating spells, didn't we? And that was kind of the jar spell and the charm bag. And although you don't necessarily have to just use them for money and the like, what we'd often find trying to teach someone from the very beginning, someone that doesn't understand magic, doesn't think that it's real, and hasn't got a clue whether it works or not, to try and teach them in the space of, what was it, like 15 minutes? Something 15. Like that. Simple formula for going away and being able to cast their own spells. We kind of opted for the charm bag or jar kind of candle spell, because that makes sense, I think, from a psychological perspective. And I think that I know that I'm a bit biased in that that's often what we do with the beginners, but I think that the good approach to that is that you're not really learning a spell, you're learning a formula or a way.
You're learning the method of casting.
Yeah, it's all in the method. So do you want to talk us
through those?
Yeah, talk us through them.
Because you're probably worn out by doing this all. I'll be your own.
And then we can compare and contrast the
Okay.
two types, and what sort of people are drawn to each one in terms of the problems. And maybe we can talk about, you know, like helping people win lottery and shit like that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, so we normally break it down into two methods of casting. So the first one of those, I'll go with the jar spell first because you like the jar spells, don't you, Liam?
I do love a jar, Chris. I
You do
do
love a
love a
jar.
jar.
So yeah, so when you're talking about a jar spell, in that moment you're talking about putting in energy. Oh, is that my internet or is that you? Is putting that energy into a jar. Now the idea of a jar is like a candle spell, and often includes candles as part of the powering for that spell. But it's the idea that you're essentially building up an energy bomb and then letting it go off. So you're setting a. Oh, I almost said it then. Did you hear that? I almost said the I word.
Don't say it, Chris. Don't say it.
I
It's
almost
not
said the I
perfect.
word. It's about setting a goal and knowing how you want to achieve that goal. And what you do is you put that in the jar and then you essentially light the fuse if you're using the candle spell, or set it off in some way, shape, or form. And that energy then ripples out and then obviously will hit the thing that you want it to hit. So the whole idea is that it should go out. The problem with this kind of method is that you are sending out a shockwave, and it is a one-use spell. So we often talk on here about one-use spells. So
Yeah.
in order to
Hashtag single use.
single use, so when you're sending out magic in that way, you're
Like a
sending out a ripple. And obviously, by doing that, you then, if it doesn't work or you need it to be changed, you then have to create another spell to counteract it, to turn it back, or if to send out a new spell in order to correct the mistake of the first one because you weren't specific enough, or you didn't realize about the radius, or how there was an easier way for. Because obviously, we often talk about magic will always take the easiest route, the most economically, energetically speaking, easiest route. So if you haven't put enough power in there to hit this magic job that's 300 miles away, then that you're then going to have to keep doing that spell over and over again until it reaches the point that it's supposed to reach. If you're lucky, you might set several bombs off, and then each wave kind of pushes the next one further out. Depends how accurate you are, though. Or you're going to send out three of the same ones that only reach to the end of the street, and unfortunately, the job's across the road in the next street. So that's the
like
kind of
that now.
like that now.
You think
But
you've planned it, and it says, yeah, there's the destination. It's going to take you X amount of time, and then it takes you down a fucking toll road, and you're like, I ain't signed up for this shit. Hashtag single use spells, which is why we're not great fans of them.
so there are other ways to use jars in the kind of attraction method. But before we go to that, I'll go through the actual method of using a charm bag. So I think we have covered it loosely before, but essentially the difference with the method of that is that that's how the best attraction spells work. So if you're going for the attraction method of I want to find every £5 that is available as I walk down the street is just drawn to me, then you're going to have to do that with something like a charm bag in where you're singling down a use. Again, I'm going to avoid the I word and say goal or the thing you're wanting to attract. You're singling, shoving that down into crystallizing it down into a bag, not necessarily using crystals, but to crystallize it down into a bag that then is worn on the person. The beauty of these types of spells is that when it's only active when it's interacting with your energetic space, your aura. So if you, for example, if it wasn't for money and you were using it for sleep, then obviously you're only going to want to go to sleep when you need to go to sleep. You're not going to want to fall asleep at the wheel of a car and plow into a tree on the way home because you forgot that obviously the little bag that you're carrying around is still on you and it shouldn't be. So, the great thing of that is there's an automatic on-off switch that you can have that is automatically programmed into a bag spell in the nature that it is a bag spell, which allows it that it's only on when it's about your person. So it doesn't necessarily need to be stuffed in your bra. What I'm saying is it needs to be in your energetic field. So, you know, a sleeping bag might only ever be used in the bedroom. You're not going to necessarily want that in the kitchen when you're handling a blender, or, you know, sat underneath the seat in your car when you're driving a car. So, you know, the nice beauty about those sorts of spells is that they're only active when it's around you. So, where do you want to go
Yeah.
next?
And that's the basic format. To create a charm bag is an attraction bag that interacts with the aura. So obviously, if you're wanting to attract money, and really what you're talking about normally is opportunities to make money, you might create a
Yeah.
charm bag. I normally say charm bag if it's a positive, and a hex bag if it's a negative. So the old idea of creating a nasty bag that attracts misfortune and destruction to the wearer is you'd create that little bag and you'd hide it under your enemy's car or in your enemy's car. Then you might find they wrap their car around a tree and die. But like the charm bag would be a positive one, so you'd probably wear the charm bag yourself. The format, the formula for how you create is the same. It's just what it's designed to do is different at the end of the day. Something's going on. So yeah. So obviously they have their limits, don't they? So what are kind of the limits of these sorts of spells? Because we've met people that have been able to do some really great things with charm bags and candle spells. And it's not so much often the formula, because the formula is super simple, but it's the energy that's required to make what they want to happen.
Yeah.
If it's physically possible, I think in terms of the laws of physics, I think it's just a certain amount of energy that needs to be applied, enough energy to make it happen. But when it's something that isn't possible, charm bag not normally capable of doing that because it's too complex.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it kind of goes back to, you know, when we're talking about triangle stuff. So it comes down to the fact of knowing what the limits of those three sides of the triangle are. So is your goal too big? Is the journey it's got to take too big, or is the energy required too big? And if you're creating a spell of either kind that has one of those unbalanced, then you're going to come into problems. And that's kind of how it works. Like, you know, we often say, don't we, that if you're going for money magic, start little and build. Don't go straight for I want £1,000,000. For £1,000,000 to get to you, that requires a lot of energy or complicated currents necessarily in order to get it. What would be easier is for smaller wins of £1,000 a week for the next 10 weeks. Suddenly, it suddenly becomes a lot more manageable. There's lots of different ways that £1,000 could fall in your lap, but that's kind of how it works. So if you can break it down into chunks and kind of go, okay, that's what I want it. That way, you've got a smaller amount of energy required for each of those than is required if you were to say, I want 20 million by tomorrow. What are the methods that would be required, like the routes that the laws of physics, like you say, Liam, could bring that to you in this physical realm? How would that money materialize? Like, you know, if it feels like it's a hard thing to do, it's probably going to require a lot of energy. So
Simpler it is, generally speaking, the simpler the approach you'd probably take. In regards to Alex's question, does it really matter if it's visible to other people? Because he says he's heard mixed opinions. I'm taking this as charm bags. Yes, of course it matters, because if you've designed your charm bag to feed off of the attention of others, and it's not getting any attention because no one can see it, that would be a big no. That would be an epic fail. Okay. So obviously you've got to think about how you're constructing it. Essentially, all a charm bag is a spell that involves a bag that you put magical shit in. Okay. So there's a lot of different ways of designing them and a lot of different approaches you can take to designing them. And depending on the method you take will depend on simple little rules like that. You know, a hex bag if you're wanting to attract misfortune to someone and the whole point is to hide that hex bag on them or in a place where they are, you wouldn't want them to see that because they'll be thinking, what's that strange little bag there?
Why has it got a
Throw
funny
that in
smell?
the bin. Yeah. You know? So it's basically common sense a lot of the time with that.
Yeah. Why has it got a photo of me scribbled out inside? Like,
Why
you know,
are the eyes scratched out?
why are the eyes scratch out? Why is someone burned cigarette burns through my face? Like, you know?
Yeah. There was one someone brought a picture of it to the pagan moot I went to, and it was a box that had been put underneath someone's car, and you open it up and there's two figures. One of them's hanging from the lid in a noose, and the other one had like bullet holes with red blood marks in it, and then a load of sigils and ingredients were inside it. Now that was placed under the person's car, and it was either, from my impressions of it, it was either an amateur that was crap at magic, or it was just designed to scare someone.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough power emanating from it, and it was pretty sloppy to put one of those works boxes, you know, the little wooden boxes, make something out of that and stick it under someone's car, because you know they're going to drive away and you know someone's going to find it.
Yeah.
Now, if that was a Pandora's box, I'm a big fan of those, because people cannot resist a box you tell them don't open.
Yeah.
So literally the trigger being, but then we're going to trigger spells, we're going into tricking people, and that's kind of going into different realms, because you'd never really use that with magic. But maybe we should do an episode on trickster magic. That might be a pretty cool one.
We'll do the delights of Mercury, or we could call it Pandora's box. The last thing I would say is, obviously, if that box wasn't supposed to be found, it would have been better buried underneath the exhaust of the car, or drilled it into the bottom of the car,
or not put it in a box.
Put it in a box, yeah. Tie it in a bag and tie it to the car.
Make an oil and then put that over the car. So what's Lauren saying? I made a charm bag for my man to carry in his wallet. That is based on solar current to draw praise and recognition, and most importantly, raises at work. I used a coin instead of stone to keep it flat, for obvious reasons. Very good. I've accidentally sat on a charm bag that I put in my back pocket.
That's always funny.
I try to tend it on Sundays, which is a great excuse to dig in his wallet. So this is a good point that kind of Lauren's talked about, which is the idea of between the single use and the ongoing, is the fact that you continue to feed it an ongoing spell. And the charm bags do little poos, don't they, Chris?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're doing it in the way in which Lauren's doing, which is brilliant, which is give the husband the illusion that he's making more money, and you use the money. Like, I think that's genius.
Yes. So well done, husband. Now give me the money.
Exactly. So yeah, the big difference between a jar spell in that method and the charm bag is that kind of single use versus ongoing. So with the charm bag, you've got the opportunity to upgrade the bag, recharge it regularly. Like I said, have an on-off switch rather than a letting it go and seeing what happens. It is that kind of integrated work. I like doing it with beginners, particularly because I like when they feel the energy when they raise it for the first time. And for most beginners who have never actually raised energy before, I think that's quite a powerful little moment where they just kind of think, oh, okay, I did something here and I saw it happen. I think it's the same reason people like candle spells when they start off, is they like seeing the candle burn down. Like it's a very physical representation. The one twist I will add is I often, with jar spells, will tweak them. Like I said, they commonly include candles, but I'll often do kind of money jar spells. So where that every time you scratch a scratch card and it's a winning card, you pop the penny in the jar. So there is a physical representation of the coins building. And then obviously, even if you just stick all those in a charity box at the supermarket when it's full and start again, like, you know, or you get a bigger jar, like you find a way to change that, like, or you cash all the pennies into a £5 note, and then the £5 note sits at the bottom of the jar, and you let it kind of build back up again. But again, that's a different kind of jar spell. It's still an attraction
Abracadabra
spell.
jar.
Yeah,
I think I did an abracadabra box,
yeah.
which was like that. It might be on the Witchcraft Live Facebook group somewhere. I'm sure I did it for that. So you can go online and get loads of inspiration about money spells and that. So we're not going to bore you with those details. There's also some in the Witchcraft Live Facebook group, which we've done because people have asked questions in that. So get yourself in there and see what other people have done and the little videos and that. What I want to do is I want to work out and talk people through, I think, how you get there once you've got that method. Once you understand the method, it's the making sure that it doesn't affect you negatively. So making sure that kind of journey, how it manifests, is the way you want it to manifest, one. And the second, of course, is the thing that everyone always pulls us up, which is the energy. Now, what you have to remember is that both of the methods, both the jar spell candle, which is like basically candle magic at the end of the day, and the ongoing charm bag spell, they take energy to work, and they both work slightly differently. How do you tell how much energy it's going to require to actually make that thing happen? Now, a lot of that is down to experience, but what it is not doing is not memorizing like you do in the kitchen. How many grams of this, how many ounces of that? Doesn't work like that. What it really I try to make it super simple and think about is, if you're like at the fairground rides, or the carnival or whatever, or the amusement arcade, you've got that you've got those machines with the punch bag that drops down and you have to punch it and then it comes up with a score, and the harder you punch it and the faster you punch it, then the higher the score is. That's much like a single use spell. The more single use spells you do, you should be able to feel the energy that's raised, and you should internally start to measure it. Now, there isn't really, strictly speaking, an external unbiased measurement. This is something that you need to learn over time. So it's a lot like looking around the room where you currently are, looking at your furniture and thinking, how heavy is that furniture? There'll be things that you can lift, there'll be things you can't lift, but there'll be things that you can lift with resistance. So that's literally, because it's like a punch, it's a single use, one time. You've got to generate all of that force together. Now, the charm bag, what we really like about that is it's almost like, I think, volume control. Obviously, you can experiment then. That's basically just an output. It's outputting energy that's been programmed to do something. So if you're finding that it's not having a big enough effect, all you need to do is
dial it up.
the energy, dial it up. That's a lot more like one of those let's see, amusement arcades, like one of those arm wrestling machines where you literally hold on as a robot and you've literally got to do it. You continue to apply force and you continue to up the force until you're getting the results you want. Now, providing that you don't open it up so that it manifests in a way that's really stupid, because of course grandma might die and give you an inheritance and you may not want that. But if that's super simple because she's on her deathbed anyway, it don't take a lot of energy to tip her over, does it? So you've got to think about these things and make sure that those are blocks. How you put that in, how you program that in, is up to you. I think we may come under fire, Chris, sometimes, because stereotypically a lot of them will make people write petitions, and we never ever get people to write petitions for their charm bags. We get them to do it kind of through visualization and say, this is how I want it coming, this is how I want it coming, this is a no, that's not what I want. But the mere act of actually putting that and getting that right in your mind as you're building the spell and as you're interacting with it is enough. You don't have to write it down all on a piece of paper, just some careful thought.
You need to have considered the options.
It's considering options. Lauren's chipping back in as well. I think she's spilling her secrets tonight. My other money spell is a vase behind my front door. I add pennies. It's overflowing. and I juiced it up recently by tying Chris's Jupiter yarn around it. Oh, now we're opting for some planetary magic, external energy sources. We'll go into that next then. It's a slow and steady builder to keep money coming into the house.
That's a steady trickle that you want. It's not relying. It's not the I need £500 this week to pay my bill. That is I just want a steady income coming in that's more than we actually normally earn. So at that point, it's just picking them up and attracting them as the opportunities fly by.
Lottery spells would normally be single use because you've got a deadline and you want everything done in that deadline, and you either raise the appropriate amount of energy or you don't. But there should be always a learning process. And normally, if you stick to a simple method, like these are all very simple methods, it's difficult to mess up. And when you do mess it up, it'll be very obvious as to what the problem is. Either not enough energy or you weren't clear enough on how it was supposed to manifest. However, those types of spells do have their limitations, but their limitations aren't generally met by the vast majority of people, I don't think, Chris, because most people want stuff that's achievable. Most people want, I want to win the lottery. And the perspective is the lottery, that's too difficult. I can't do that with a charm bag, or I can't do that with a candle spell, when actually you can. Okay. Rejigging the geopolitical economic climate, difficult,
a little bit more tricky.
Very difficult to do because it's so complex. Okay, so that you would need to use other forms of magic for. You probably wouldn't cope well with that with a charm bag. However, if you wanted a country or company to go bankrupt, you could probably do that with a hex bag or with a jar spell if you provided enough energy into that to make that happen. But remember, the more complex it is, the more intelligence you need. And which brings me into kind of using spirits, because the intelligence, when you can understand exactly how this is going to manifest and you don't need external input because the economy is quite complicated, getting something that has a very much bigger picture can really help with that. So getting a spirit to do that for you, you can talk to the spirit. Is much like being a CEO and getting your financial executive to go away and do what you've told them to do. You know you need to make cuts, and you know you want to make cuts in whatever department. So what you do is you say to the financial people and the department heads, you go off and do that. You need to do that. I don't understand it. You go and do that. You know, you got to start thinking about this kind of thing. Obviously, Witch Wars 3 is around, and for those that are interested in working with spirits of the Goetia, we picked a fairly easy, nice one, but there are others that you could use. I think like Boone, I think it isn't it, that does all the money magic. Might be worthwhile. So that would be getting a spirit involved. But remember, that is a third party. It's another person thing that has an agenda. Yeah. So start off with
the only big pointer we'll consider with that is, like we always say, careful with how you're enforcing said contract. So, whenever you're outsourcing part of your spell work, how are you making sure they're going to do it? Asking, a wealth spirit of some description. I'm trying to think of one that comes to mind. I don't know, Jupiter, to ask Jupiter to go and give you rain down gold coins. How are you making that contract? How are you paying for it? And secondly, how are you enforcing it? So if Jupiter decides, no, I didn't like that cut of beef, I'd have preferred antelope, and you can't get an antelope, how are you supposed to then make sure that he still follows through on his end of the deal?
Yeah. Lauren's come up with a really interesting one. She said, we've just given her a great idea to make a charm bag that bankrupts one person and transfers the money to another person. Oh, you're such a bad girl, Lauren. You're such a bad girl. Well done. It's nice to
Transmutation.
see we're having a positive influence on the magical community.
Yeah. Transmutation. We like those.
So here's my problem, Chris. My problem is there'll be people that are listening to this that think they understand the theory and the basics of it. And they'll go to the Thoth TV YouTube video. Where is that? I'm pointing that way. Thoth TV YouTube channel, video on charm bags or video on jar spells. And they'll say, Liam, is it all right if I don't use a crystal? Because you used a crystal in that. Is it all right if I don't use a crystal? Oh, I don't have that ingredient. What do I use? And if you're asking those questions, you really ain't fucking getting it. Okay? Think about the structure of the spell you're doing. Yes, the structure. The little magic triangle. I think we needed to devote an entire episode on the magic triangle. I think we actually did, didn't we? We did that on episode 1 of Fausty Witches.
Yeah, I think we did.
About the triangle. Yeah, we've already done that. Go and watch that. Because it's one of those things that you need to think, okay, if I'm asking someone, can I substitute an ingredient? The chances are you don't know what that ingredient does, and you don't know how the spell works by the very nature of you asking if you can substitute it. Can I use a different thing? Of course you can use a fucking different thing if it works. How does it work? Oh, I don't know. Then how are you going to be able to pick the right substitution? You know, think about the basics and then work up. Keep it simple, stupid, and then start making it more complicated. I think that's one of the reasons why we like the abracadabra, because a lot of people look at the abracadabra spell, which is also in the Witchcraft Live Facebook group, and I think also on the Thoth TV.
I think you did one on Thoth TV, didn't you?
Yeah.
I don't know if it explained. Did it explain both ways of the triangle though?
No. So I only used it for a building. No, for tearing down, I think. But someone else used the abracadabra spell to make money, and I did one in the Witchcraft Live group about using abracadabra to make money and then using it to take money away. And it will depend, but the basic structure should be there. If you're having to ask about substituting ingredients, then you don't understand the structure, because you remember when you learn magic, it's not chemistry and it's not cooking. It may look a lot like it, but it's not, because what you're not doing is copying and adding the same amount of ingredients, all that is the same. What you're doing is you're understanding and sensing the energy and the output, and then adjusting your spell accordingly. Okay. What's Lauren saying now? VK Johanna says demons grow by helping people and essentially do it from the goodness of their hearts. Can you respond to that idea? Oh, that's a really good point. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about demons in particular. I'm going to talk about spirits in general. Okay.
That sounds fair.
If we're all on a journey, both us in the physical world, animals, spirits of every different kind, we've all got our own lives. Okay, some lifespans may go through multiple universes and exist outside of space-time and the like, but essentially everything and everyone is on their own path. Now, there's two ways in which you can work. You can either, in order to progress, let's say, and evolve as a thing, you can either stop every other fucker from evolving, or you can help others evolve so they in turn can help you evolve. The secrets of this you tend to see in martial arts, actually, because if you join a martial arts school, you'll find that all of the younger ones, the white belts and the yellow belts and the experienced, get taught by the black belts. You kind of think, well, the black belts know it all. They're really good. Why would they do that? What did they get out of it? And what they get out of it is refreshing all of the basics constantly, but also they, to a certain extent, learn control. They learn to take a slower step, to really work through it, because there's nothing like, and I think you know this, Lauren, there's nothing like if you understand a concept, then trying to teach someone else and guide someone else along that concept only ever hammers it further into your own brain and gets your own kind of thought process going. So in terms of growing and helping, there are spirits that understand this, and there are spirits that don't understand it. Just because a spirit understands the concept does not mean that they ascribe to that philosophy. Okay, so yes, there are other things out there that will want to help you. And out of those things that want to help you, some of them will be good at helping you, others will be shit at helping you.
I think you need to put Lauren's next point up.
Teaching is the highest level of learning.
I like that.
If you say so, we might need to steal that and use
Hashtag.
that. There's an Egyptian god by the name of Bez. Lauren, who is supposed to be great, exactly that. Oh, look, some internal chat going on in the comments section.
Internal chat.
Yep.
However, Bess is not
chat.
technically a god. It's more of a nature spirit. But let's be a bit more careful about our terms of the word god. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah. We tend to use the term spirits because I would say god, goddesses, deities is a slippery slope there.
And particularly problematic when it comes to Egyptians. Because the word God has no meaning there. There is no, what we use for the term God limits the Egyptian pantheon too much, in my opinion. But yeah, carry on.
You've got some quite high level magicians that are working there, so they've left this concept behind and they've got more complicated concepts that most people in the two-dimensional world struggle to understand the three-dimensional world. And certain inner sanctums of places which the everyday plebs, of course, knew nothing about, much like the everyday plebs that you get these days in magical forums and Facebook groups and the like, don't know a huge amount about magic. The everyday people back then didn't know a huge amount about magic, but what we're doing often is we're looking at all of these hieroglyphics and the like, thinking that we understand them, and then translating them and saying, oh yeah, everyone understood that back in the day, when actually not really, and assuming you understand it. We got a podcast episode about decoding ancient languages and concepts and stuff. I think at some point, higher level language, something like that. I think it is. But yeah, we've got literally like 10 minutes left. So how do we wrap up the money magic? Is there any specific questions you guys have got? In which case, start typing that quick. And other than that, I'd say, trying to keep it simple, generally speaking, because less can go wrong. And if it's simple, then when it does go wrong or is not working out right, it's not manifesting properly or enough, you can tweak it. You'll have more of an understanding. A simple analog machine is easier to fix than a complicated digital machine at the end of the day. So, think about cars, the old-fashioned cars, you were able to fix them yourself with the right parts. Nowadays, these modern ones,
unless you're an electrician,
computers and shit, isn't it? All computers and shit. So, the only other thing I would say, I've actually forgotten, but it was along the lines of that, keeping it simple, then you can diagnose your own problems, and really it's discovering your own power. And then when you understand your own power, which is what that kind of first episode of the spellcasting course was all about, I think some people missed that. You then know when you need to call your friend up to help you lift the sofa. There's no point in calling them up to help you lift the sofa if you know that you can pick it up yourself. This is what you need to do.
I'm not being funny, but Zeus or Athena or any god that you happen to be using that week is not going to be best pleased when you're asking them to roll a couch out, when really you could have done that on your own. One, that's less likely to happen based on the fact that why would they bother? And two, it's a case of do you really go to petition work on stuff that is that simple? Anyway, carry on. Yes, you definitely should bump up that video.
So Eric is covered on the spellcrafting course. So
Which
we've got
is
an actual
Thoth.
spellcrafting course on the Thoth TV YouTube channel. So it's on there. I will be putting more videos on that spellcrafting course. But so far, even the simple ones that I've put on, people still are exploring those concepts, and I don't want to muddy the water and make things more complicated. Because they're winning the lottery and the like, you should be able to do all of that with those that are already on there. It's really when we start to get into more complicated things, because people overestimate. They think there's something I really want. Okay. Oh, this
Therefore, it
was what I
must be
was going to say.
difficult.
This is what I was going to talk about, actually. If I'm really in need of something, my mind is not focused. When I'm in debt and I'm this close to being evicted from my house and losing my job and that, my mind isn't focused. Therefore, in times like that, you want to choose the simplest spells and put the highest amount of energy into them. Complexity doesn't necessarily equal power, okay? Certainly not at the beginning. Complexity is generally something that you'd often use to deal with complexity. But you getting evicted from your house or losing your job or wanting to learn the lottery is not complex. That's very simple. It's a matter of bringing money in or getting the boss to choose to get rid of someone else or something like that. That's simple. So you should be taking simple solutions to that. Alex does say, can you expand on that point, Chris? I'm presuming he was talking about Egyptian gods
Yeah,
and the
God's
like.
not, and not the gods being a too limiting term is probably what he was asking about. I don't really have enough time to discuss it on here, but
We'll do a podcast on it.
We'll do a podcast or something on it. But essentially, what I'm saying is the word God and our use of the word translation of the word God in terms of Egyptian archaeology is based on a Victorian idea of what deities are. So, it's heavily Christianized. The word God does not mean, well, at least the word they've equated to God doesn't mean God. So if you spend any time with these entities, you will start to understand that that's not what they are. They don't have a human form necessarily, and they aren't animals.
Where they came from as well. This is a big mistake, is that what you'll tend to get, particularly with the people that follow that kind of idea of, oh, it's all just an archetype, it's all just personification of that kind of thing. There are personifications of energy that would be considered gods, but you cannot exchange one pantheon for another. Greco-Roman, if you take the Greek pantheon, you take the Roman pantheon, they're all made from the same stuff, right? Norse, slightly different. They're not the same thing. And I'm not talking about entities. I'm talking about where they originate from, what they're made out of. All of that sort of thing is complicated. If you compare the Greek and then the Norse and then the Egyptian, you'd get into some pretty hot water there, because a lot of them aren't gods. They get labeled as gods, but they're not gods. And you need to have a really strong idea and sense of what a god actually is. Of course, the problem with this is the sort of people that don't understand this are the people that get it all from books. And they say, I'll buy a book on Egyptian mythology, and I'll buy a book on this mythology and that mythology, and it says God this, God that, God of this, God of that. They don't understand the story that's behind it. They can't see and understand the energetic composition of the thing as well. Yeah. So they get into hot water.
The easiest way to demonstrate this is to look at a movie that's made in one language and then see what it's called in another. And if you were to actually just take the movie title and move it from one place to another, or use a Google Translate and then use the Google Translate to translate it back the other way, you will get Chinese whispers. That's kind of how this happens with when people label with the things in the English language that aren't big enough to cover the concepts they are describing. And unfortunately, deity is one word that is troublesome. God is a really troublesome word. Like I said, there are different levels within the Egyptian pantheon that cover a whole range, mainly because of the level of mysticism that they're in charge of at that point means that their language for it has developed far beyond where our language is for it. So it hasn't caught up with its usage. So the word that's often translated as God is neter. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Neter. And that's the word that's often referred to as translated in English to God. The word doesn't mean God. It means so much more than God. It doesn't mean personification in the same way that the Greco-Romans would use it. It's not about an embodiment in any way, shape or form. The closest I can come to is consider them all rivers. They're all energy currents. And rather than it actually having an embodiment or a face, it is talking about the concept as a whole. That's the shortest way I can possibly say it, and that probably makes no sense whatsoever. But essentially, it's one of those that we would do a 5-hour lecture, and I don't think we'd get to the bottom of it. There is just too much to unpack. We're not saying other deities and other pantheons don't have similar issues, but they go in different ways. At least when you use the word God and compare it to the Greco-Roman, there is some similarity there because of the time frame, partially, and the ideology of where Christianity comes from. And I don't mean Hebrew as in the further, I mean the actual time frame that actually shapes Christianity is Greco-Roman. So the word is linked in that way. Whereas actually, if you were to go and compare that to, again, the Norse is a tricky one to even make that segue across. They exist in the same time period, but not from the same cultures. So there isn't enough overlay in order. That's why it gets so tricky when you get to the Anglo-Saxon and you start to see the new versions of Norse versus the old versions of Norse. So anyway, we'll have to do one on mythologies or something like that for Fausty, maybe. That's just a watered down version of the bigger, so we can intro it in, maybe.
Yeah, okay. So we'll probably have to do dissecting gods then, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Basically, to keep it super simple, I suppose if you want to go away and mull it over, think in terms of God is a Western word that gets attached to lots of things. There is a huge list upon lists upon lists of spirits and deities and the like that get labeled as gods. Some of them are dead humans, souped up, the mighty dead. Some of them existed before this universe. Some of them grew up in this universe. Some of them are energy currents that have been reforged and bound and housed to make it easier for humans to interact. Sometimes these energy currents manifest themselves, sometimes they don't. It's extremely complicated, but what we tend to do as humans in the Western world is say, fuck me, that's a powerful spirit. It must be a god, because God equals power because of the Abrahamic religions. When, of course, we know that there are lots of different types of gods.
And Liam covered all different kinds there that exist within all of these. So we're not saying even one of those types is a whole typecast for one pantheon. There are these kind of different levels of spirits in every pantheon in the world, and every culture, being, gone, coming. You know, there are deities that are starting to appear now that haven't even come to full fruition yet. So, you know, that we will yet, you know, you are yet to meet until further lifetimes, but they are already in existence or are already coming to being. So, you know, it's tricky.
So I think that is it for today. I don't think we've got any other questions. No, I think that's it. So I'm not sure what next week's Fausty episode will be. But we could make it about whatever we just talked about. Not the gods thing, because I think that's got to be a podcast one because it's just too long. But I know we were talking about other things earlier, so yeah.
We will definitely add something to do with dissecting gods on here as well as the podcast. it'll be of a different flavour completely, as it always is.
We did a
But-
Fausty Witches on, I think, spirits.
Yeah.
And we did talk about dissecting spirits then. So we have covered quite a lot of this before on Fausty Witches. But again, I think a lot of the times it goes over the heads of some people. And then it's only when they've heard it said in a different way that they then suddenly, it kind of clicks.
It clicks.
So you'd be surprised how much stuff we do cover on the podcast, particularly that we say it 3 or 4 times, and then it's only on the 5th time someone turns around and said, "Oh, I was fascinated by that thing you said," and I'm like, "Well, we've discussed this loads of times."
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think partly with the podcast, people forget it is designed for us. That's how we talk. It's condensed existence of that hour. So, you know, obviously you need to be on the Patreon for the second half, but you know, for that hour, you are getting a pocket of shared experience. These aren't new concepts for either of us. So it is just kind of throwing it all out there. And actually what people forget to do is you need to listen to some of these 2 or 3 times for you to kind of just pick out the content that you actually want at the time as it's relevant, and then play it back in a few weeks' time and you'll hear a completely different podcast to the time you heard it before. So, you know, regurgitate some of them.
Some would say it's designed that way.
Almost.
To work on multiple layers to cater for people with multiple abilities. But I can neither confirm or deny that.
Neither can I. I'm not.
Either we're geniuses and we planned that, or it just kind of happened. But there we go. That is it for this edition of the Fausty Witches Show, brought to you by the Keep On Chatting Network. If you want to see other shows that are almost as good as this, then you can find them on the Keep On Chatting Facebook page or on the Keep On Chatting YouTube channel. Of course, all of the previous episodes of Fausty Witches are also on there. So obviously, go back and check them out if this is the first one you've listened to. And I think that's it. Good night and goodbye.
Bye.